So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Well, thank you, my friend Jesse Cole, the owner of the Savannah Bananas. Welcome to 15 on Fridays with Fletch. And today's special guest is a legend in the baseball industry, Major League Baseball industry. He's in his 40th year in the industry. He's been with the Detroit Tigers. He's been with the Houston Astros, and now in God's country with our own Texas Rangers for the past 17 years. He oversaw the construction of Globe Life Field, and he was just promoted to the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for the Texas Rangers. He's the chairman of the board of the Arlington Convention and Visitors Bureau and is the liaison for the Rangers to anything and everything that touches the Arlington area. So please welcome my friend and the baseball legend that doesn't play baseball, ROB MATWICK. Rob, we're glad to have you with us.
Fletch, it's my pleasure. Glad to join you this Friday afternoon.
Well, I know you wear a lot of hats for the Rangers and the community. So tell us how you balance it all. You got a lot of stuff going on.
You know, it's interesting. When I first transitioned at the start of the year, it was a little slow. And I guess, January, February, maybe that's to be expected as people are just coming out of the holidays and getting the new year underway. So I was a little concerned at first that I wasn't going to have enough to keep me busy. But man, I tell you, since the season started, and maybe it coincides with the start of the baseball season, but it has been nonstop all summer long. I've slowed down a little bit in July, not having the All-Star game this year, and a lot of people on vacation. But now the kids are back in school. Local government is up and running, and many of the local governments are finalizing budgets and have a lot of important work they're trying to get done now. So August, September, and now as we roll toward October here, it has been full on. So it's been really exciting. The days are packed, and I keep my own calendar, so that's probably the most important thing, is just making sure that anything I need to get done is getting onto that calendar so we can get it knocked out. But it's been great to be back in a little bit more of the public realm. I started my career in media relations, so I'm very used to being out front, working with media, having worked with athletes over the years, except now more of my focus is on the public and then local government entities. So, but I really enjoy just being out with people, and I've got the tie on this Friday because I'm going to a Chamber of Commerce dinner tonight. But I'm absolutely loving it.
Well, you're a great example of being a servant leader. So how did you develop that skill?
I'll tell you what, I had the great fortune to work with a guy named Drayton McClain for 15 years.
Good guy.
Yeah, when he owned the Houston Astros. And you talk about an example of a servant leader, a man of God, and a man who just, is a legend in business, not only in Texas, but around the world, for what he's done with the McClain Company. And, Drayton was a tremendous example for all of us. It was interesting that we could have these knockdown, drag out meetings in staff meetings. But Drayton always opened, he always set the tone. But then at the end of every meeting I was ever in with him, he always brought everybody together. He acknowledged, if there were differing opinions around the room, he would acknowledge that, hey, we may have some differences here, but here's what I think, here's what I'm hearing, here's what I think is the best thing that we should do. And he always left a meeting with a positive message. And I never forgot that. It just stayed with me that he had a great way of bringing everybody back together and getting the consensus around the table and moving it forward. But in the same respect, he also understood that the final decision rested with him as the president, as the CEO of the company. So, everybody else could, how that goes. Sometimes everybody else could be opposed, but the CEO says, what, based on my experience, my thinking, I hear what you're all saying, but this is what we're going to do. And I always had tremendous respect because I felt like, my opinions were being acknowledged and valued. And, he just left you feeling good when you walked out of a meeting. So he was probably, the first real business mentor that I had. And like I say, I had the honor of working with him for 15 years. So, you learn a lot of lessons over that amount of time. And coming from a person like Drayton, just something that stayed with you. And, I've been fortunate, my basketball coach in college was a great mentor to me. Certainly Ray Davis and Neil Liebman, my bosses here with the Rangers, are tremendous mentors and amazing business people. Learn from them every day. But I would say, Drayton, over the course of those 15 years, was invaluable to me.
Well, that's incredible. Well, you're involved with the World Cup and IndyCar. They're coming to Arlington. What are some of those events that would surprise us, some of the details?
Well, World Cup, we've been working on it. Might surprise some people. We've actually had work going on. When I say we, collectively across the region, probably now for a year and a half, if not 2 years. And it's some of those unsexy things like sidewalk replacements and getting new signage in place and making sure that traffic signals are functioning and that we have all of the infrastructure up to speed that we need to do. And of course, we do that. When I say we, I mean our civic partners, City of Arlington, the Public Works team, certainly law enforcement now is getting more engaged. There was a meeting in Houston this week where both APD and AFD attended, and we had representatives from the cities that hosted the FIFA Club World Cup this past summer. So those cities were sharing their experiences with the cities that will be hosting World Cup next summer. So that's a great opportunity to get in front of some other security law enforcement type people to talk about lessons learned and what we can anticipate going forward. Part of the challenge with the World Cup is we don't know who's coming until December. We'll figure out who's in the pool here locally. And then, of course, with 9 games, once you get out of the pool play, then you start to advance into those knockout games where, now it's just not, the first 5 games will be pool. So we'll know those teams as they play. But then you get into that knockout stage, and that's where you have teams coming from other parts of North America to compete here in Arlington. And, that it's just an interesting dynamic because you don't know what countries are coming your way. You don't know what their travel habits are. And that's part of it. That's the biggest thing we've been trying to figure out and anticipate is, okay, how many people are going to drive? How many people are going to expect to travel by transit? How many rideshare cars do we need parking for? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have, it's going to be in June and July. We need to make sure we have shade, water, restrooms, all those things for people waiting outside in line or outside, enjoying a party before a game starts. We've heard a lot about, the marches that the different countries will have to the stadium. So one of the things I was picking up on from some of the other from the Club World Cup cities was that, some communities were able to designate parade routes. So sounds a little crazy, but when you've got several thousand people from a country that want to parade to the AT&T Stadium, you need to make sure that we can provide them with safe passage. So we're just starting to learn about those things now. So, and trying to figure out how we can safely do that and not interrupt traffic flow or game operations as those people approach stadiums. So that's an interesting one. On the Grand Prix, one of the things that's been taking place here locally is an adjustment in the streets. So the city's public works department has been out at intersections and actually redoing intersections. I didn't realize, and if you see those Indy cars, they are so close to the ground that you need to make sure that you have appropriate clearance when these guys are coming around corners at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. And then when they're hitting those straightaways, those road surfaces need to be absolutely perfect. So there's been work that started about 2 months ago between Rangers homestands. We'll do it here around Cowboys games in the fall to try to redo intersections to make sure that they'll be safe for the IndyCar. So that's been pretty interesting. And then just trying to set up a street course and then figure out how, there are areas that will have to open after the competition days on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that we can get services in, for trash to replenish, food, beer, and when staff are moving in and out of areas, at the hotel and at Texas Live and all those places. So there's a lot of coordination. Fortunately, the Penske team, does this around the country and, around the world. So they're the experts. So we're learning a lot now about what it takes to host, that type of street race here in Arlington.
That's just incredible. And so it is scale-wise, is it true that like a single soccer, one of these soccer games, FIFA is the equivalent of a Super Bowl?
That's what they tell us. I think you can expect that the economic impact would be that large. Not only that, but what's interesting about it with the International Broadcast Center at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center, as you can imagine, the majority of people working out of that space, whether they come to the matches in Arlington or whether they go to matches in Philadelphia or Kansas City or Miami, you may have broadcasters from around the world who are anchored here for the better part of a month and maybe a little bit longer, and then are going around the country to go out to matches. So that fills a lot of hotel rooms and meals at restaurants and just the needs that people have, personal needs like laundry and things like that. that someone would need to be in a location for a month or month and a half. I remember when I was with the Astros back in, gosh, 92, I guess it was, we had the Republican National Convention at the Astrodome. And the Astros literally went on a 22-game, 28-day road trip. And I went, I think it's 24 games over 28 days, but I made the first 3 weeks of the trip and then handed off to an assistant for the last part of that. But, again, we were on the road literally for basically a month of the baseball schedule. And that's tough. So at least these people will be anchored here at the broadcast center. But I think that's the thing. It's not just the match days, but you're going to have a lot of people that are here to support the matches that are going to be embedded with us here in the community for better part of a month and maybe a little bit longer than that. So I do think the economic impact will deliver. And then we'll see from a fan standpoint. I think a lot of it will have to do in pool play with who we get in the draw. And we'll know that on December 5th. So, and then when you get to knockout stages, I mean, obviously those are the teams that have come out of the pools. These are now the best 32 teams in the world, down to 16 teams, down to 8, and then we have a semifinal match. So at that stage, we're down to the best 4 teams, and one of those is going to play for a championship. So it'll be fascinating to see as the rounds progress and the intensity ratchets up, and teams have a chance to win the World Cup. That's when it's really going to be fun.
You've been in the baseball arena for 40 years, and so you must have some really memorable moments. What would a couple of them be?
Well, certainly the pinnacle was, in November 23 and winning the World Series in Arizona. One of the cool things about it was my brother lives in Arizona, and so he was actually at the game with his son and a couple of grandkids. So after we clinched, we weren't sitting together, but we were close enough in the park that within a few minutes after winning the World Series, I was able to get over to him, and it was very emotional to say the least, because he knows how long I've been in this game, and having not had a chance to win it, but then to be able to do it with him there, I think was really cool. I mean, first thing I did after we won was to call my wife, call my daughter, and then go see my brother and just watch, the trophy presentation and everything was really awesome.
A quick Nolan Ryan story.
Oh gosh, where do you start? He's it's funny. My first week on the job here with the Rangers, may have been it was the first couple of days actually. Nolan was still relatively new, and he and Kelly Fisher, our CFO, sort of had these. They were sort of gigging each other, and I think having a lot of fun with it around the office. Well, I show up. I think it was on my second day, and Kelly all of a sudden is passing out T-shirts to everybody around the executive office there outside Nolan's office. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And the shirts, white T-shirts, black script with "I Heart Ventura" on the bottom.
Oh.
And it was just to gig Nolan, I guess. So we all put these shirts on. There's about 10 or 15 of us. And we're in Nolan's office as he comes walking around the balcony. The way he had to get up to the office is everything there. And he's out there unlocking his door, and he didn't see us yet. So he's getting ready to come into the office. And we're all standing there in our "Good morning, Nolan, I Heart Ventura" Ventura T-shirts. And he just thought, Kelly just thought, oh, this could be the greatest thing. And Nolan, he just, he stopped and he just sort of rolled his eyes back, and he got a chuckle out of it, right? Well, the time comes, he said, hey, Kelly, come on over here. I'm going to get a picture with you. Because of course, we had a photographer in there to just capture his reaction and everything. And his timing is so impeccable. He had his arm around Kelly, and as that photographer was ready to take the picture, he said, "Give me a little countdown, like 3, 2, 1 there. We'll smile and everything, right? 3, 2," and he just sort of gently put his arm around her like he did Ventura, and put his fist up like this. And it's one of the best pictures. And then he went and had it turned into a Christmas ornament that I think Kelly still hangs on her tree every year now. But it was like, okay, yeah, give me a 3, 2, and 3, 2, and on 1, he was like, just basically all I did was lower her head, and he had his fist up, and he was just looking at that camera. I tell you, and the only time I think I ever saw him taken aback, when Mr. Davis and Mr. Lee, when Ray and Bob Simpson at that time won the auction, in the bankruptcy court to take over control of the Rangers. Of course, Nolan and Chuck Greenberg were part of that process. He was coming in the next morning, and we gathered as a staff up in the lobby on the 4th floor of the office building there, he didn't know we were there. So we had a bottle of champagne, and Tony Taylor from our team said, Rob, I want you to present this to Nolan. So we're all gathered around the reception desk up there, and there's 3 elevator banks that come up to the 4th floor. So we could see him in the parking lot coming across the street. So we knew he's in the building, and everybody's just gathered around. And when that elevator door opened, I'm standing there with a bottle of champagne, and everybody just broke into applause. And I swear, I think it is the only time I've ever seen Nolan sort of taken aback, where he was just stopped dead in his tracks. And the moment was, pretty overwhelming. These guys were up until after midnight trying to secure the franchise, and they were successful. And again, sort of like the Ventura, so a little different circumstance, but like that, I think he was a little emotional about it too. He, in his own way, in his own gracious, down-home way, he said a few words, but I think he truly was caught up. Just thought the staff was there waiting to thank him and welcome him when he came that morning. And I had the honor of sort of presenting him with a bottle of champagne to congratulate him. It was a really cool moment, not one that anybody would know about, sort of like the Ventura thing,
Yeah.
It's sort of, a few people know about it because it creeps out from time to time, but that was another one that I really say. I've never seen him. He's so unflappable, and has been that way throughout his career, that was one moment that I really recall where I saw him taken aback, but it was in light of the circumstance, it was amazing.
That's great. Well, that's cool. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today on 15 on Fridays with Fletch. Rob Matwick, he's the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and pretty much anything else that has to do with the Rangers in Arlington. And Rob, you have been a real treat for us. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next week on 15 on Fridays with Fletch.